Joe Tilley's Great Canadian Sports Show is brought to you by DKI Canada. Across the street, across the country. He was the first professional hockey player to come out, Brock McGillis. Today, he's helping young athletes find their voice and become the best version of themselves. Joe Tilley's Great Canadian Sports Show. Coming up! Our guest today hails from Coniston, Ontario. He was a goaltender. He played in the OHL for the Sioux Greyhounds and the Windsor Spitfires. He played U Sports for the Concordia Stingers. He played in the UHL or ECHL for the Kalamazoo Wings. He played pro hockey in Europe. He is the first gay pro hockey player to come out. He won the Herb Carnegie Trailblazer Award. He was named one of the most 100 influential people by the Hockey News. He recently wrapped up the ShiftMakers Tour. We'll hear more about that. Brock McGillis, welcome to the program.
Joe, I love the intro, and I swear, if you're looking for a side gig, I'll take you on the road with me to be my hype man.
All right, sounds good, buddy. We can handle that. It's from the old ring announcer days. Let's get ready to rumble. Okay, first of all, tell us about Coniston, Ontario, and I'm assuming that's where you grew up.
Gosh, yeah. So I grew up in a few different places. I started out in Sudbury, and then I went to my dad's from a small town called Markstay, and Markstay is literally between North Bay and Sudbury in the middle of nowhere. And we ended up living there for a while and then moved to Coniston. Coniston was good. I liked Coniston. It was a lot of fun. I moved there. I didn't want to go to high school living in Markstay only because you had to take a bus that left at like 6 a.m. every day. But when I was in Coniston, I was 10 minutes from school. So it was a good time to move. And it was neat. I mean, I lived down the street from where people like Jimmy Fox or, Neil Martin played a lot of pro hockey, and different folks were and grew up. And it was cool to, be in a town with all this hockey history, and every day after school, you're playing ball hockey with everyone. And we had a little league on our street, and one of the guys kept stats, and it was a blast.
Okay. So what made you decide to be a goaltender? What prompted you to take on that job role? So
I'll give you, I've been doing some, writing some comedy bits, but I'll give you the clean version, because I think the other ones might be too dirty for your show. The reason I became a goalie is I would get up every morning. We were living in Sudbury, and I was playing minor hockey in Markstay, and my dad would drive me to the rink. It's like 5:30, 6 o'clock on a Saturday morning, and I wouldn't go on the ice. We'd be in a game, and I'd let every kid take my shift. And then some kid's helmet broke, and I gave him mine. And my dad was pissed. It's like, I'm getting up at 5 o'clock on my only day to sleep in, and this is what you're doing. So he comes off on the bench and grabs me, and he goes, "We're going home." So we're driving home, and he goes, "Why aren't you going on the ice? Like, do you not want to play hockey? You don't have to play hockey. Just tell me." And I'm like, "I want to be the goalie." He's like, "Oh." He's like, "Well, I want you to think of 3 good reasons why, and then we'll go to the Wolves game tonight, and you can give me the reasons there. And if the reasons are good enough, you can become the goalie." And we went to the game that night, and I guess I said the equipment was cool, that all the fans cheered for you after you made a save, which speaks to my narcissism.
Uh-huh.
And that everyone comes and congratulates you after the game.
Right.
And that speaks to my love of attention. So it kind of makes sense. Those three reasons in my mind, and my dad said, all right, those are good reasons. So I was like seven years old and I became the goalie.
Yeah, I want to be that guy. Yeah, the guy who gets all the accolades and the attention. Perfect. Yeah, I can relate to that.
Story of my life.
Yeah. So, let's talk about further down the line. How'd you end up with the Sioux Greyhounds? And tell us about your time there playing in the OHL, your route to the OHL.
Yeah, so I was rated pretty high going into the OHL draft. And then I did something really stupid. I was in high school and we're in gym class and some kid threw my stick or slashed me. We were playing ball hockey, slashed me, and then I threw his stick. And then all of a sudden he wanted to fight. And I'm like, I'm not fighting you, man. And then lunch came around and he kept coming up trying to goat me into a fight. And then finally I did. And I broke my hand. And I missed the second half of my OHL draft year season. I was rated really high. Now I still don't have a knuckle on my index finger. And I was rated to go in the first couple of rounds, and I dropped to the 6th because I missed the entire second half, basically. And I got picked by Windsor, and I was in Windsor. And the first year I went to camp, but at this point I was sort of struggling with my sexuality, not knowing who I was, etc. And I kept getting hurt, and I tore my groin, and I missed camp, so they sent me down, but signed me. And then the next year I came in, and I started the year with mono. And again, I think a lot of it was psychosomatic, but I started the year with mono, missed the start of the season, came back and literally had one practice, and Tom Webster was my coach, and he said, all right, you're starting the next game. I'm like, oh, okay. Like, I've lost 25 pounds, and I was just like thrown to the wolves. And I ended up starting 7 in a row. And we're in the 7th game, and we're playing Kitchener in the odd. And it's probably one of my favorite places to play. And Derek Roy played for Buffalo in a few different places.
Yeah.
Across the top of the circles on a power play. And he's cutting across to the middle of the ice, and he's in the high slot, and he takes a shot, and I make the save. And the rebound's going to the corner, and they happen to have a guy standing back door, and the rebound hits him in the chest, drops down. He has an empty netter. And I dove across, my blocker fell off. And my defenseman went to stride over and took a stride off my finger. Yeah. And I ended up missing a whole bunch of time because I severed, like, it split down the middle. And during that time, my GM, Mike Kelly, went and traded for a 20-year-old goalie. And I was depressed from everything I was dealing with personally. I was on heavy meds, painkillers for my hand, and I was just getting over mono. And I went in one day after he made the trade, and I just, out of nowhere, like, I didn't tell my agent, I didn't tell my parents, and I just said, well, what are you going to do when I'm back? And he's like, well, he's a 20-year-old, you're a rookie, like, he's the guy. And I just looked at him and said, trade me. And I don't know why I said it. I don't, like, to this day, it was a silly decision. And he said, all right. And I didn't tell my parents. I drove home, and he said, you're going to go to either Sudbury or Sault Ste. Marie. They both want you. And they're playing each other on Tuesday. It was a Tuesday. He's like, they're playing each other tonight in Sudbury. And I was like, all right. So I went to the rink to find out. I went to the Sudbury Arena to find out who I got traded to. And I ended up getting moved to the Sioux, and because they had Ray Emery, and Ray Emery was supposed to go play, make the World Junior team. So they came and got me to, show the goal. I got first star of that game, by the way. It was my first start at home ever. but Ray was supposed to go make the World Junior team, so they needed a guy to come in for a month, and they were a top 10 team in the country, and so they traded for me, and then Ray didn't end up making the team. And I was behind Ray, and Craig Hartsburg was my coach, awesome guy, treated me like gold, but he was kind of old school in the sense that, like, you're number one, I'm riding my number one, he's playing 55 games, 60 games. So it was a little frustrating time, but it was an interesting time. The Sioux's an interesting place. It's a little cut off, but it's a really good hockey town. They love their hockey there.
So did you have aspirations of making the NHL at this point in your career? Young kids too, right?
I was ranked highly on the NHL draft list. I was supposed to be a guy. I think if I wasn't struggling with everything I was struggling with, I was touted to be, an NHL pick. I mean, the night before the draft, I was getting calls from teams. Actually, the next year, I had an offer. I was signing a contract with an NHL team, and 2 days before camp, we hadn't signed yet. We're still negotiating. 2 days before their camp, I tore my MCL, and there went the contract. I picked playing later on when I was 20. I was playing pro, and I got hurt, and I came back, and I went and played in Trenton in the OJ instead of going back to the OHL, because the head of the team that year, the head scout, was Floyd Crawford, Mark Crawford's dad. And he offered me, he said, if you come here instead of going to the O, I'll guarantee you a tryout in the NHL. And I was like, well, I'm in OA. The best opportunity I'm going to get is a tryout at this point. So I took that. So my goal was always NHL. It was NHL or bust, really.
So did you get your tryout?
So it seems like my career, I wasn't destined to play in the NHL, and not because of talent, but because of circumstance. I, at 18, had all these injuries, mono, hand skated over, probably on painkillers, making decisions I shouldn't be making. And then I don't get drafted. The next year, I have a deal I'm signing, and I tear my MCL and don't go to camp. Then I go play junior the following year. I start pro in Kalamazoo. Then I go play junior in Trenton after I got hurt, because I was going to get a tryout the next year. And the next year, the lockout happened.
Oh.
So I didn't get the tryout.
So everything was working against you here. Okay, like the injury, the hand injury, the painkiller issue, the torn MCL, the lockout, and everything else was coming together. So clearly, the odds were stacked against you. So, at this point, we're in your, like, I'm assuming that you were gay for a long period of time, much longer before this was happening. How are you handling that, in OHL, junior, pro dressing rooms, where not exactly what you would consider tolerant and understanding places? So how are you struggling there?
Oh, goodness. I knew since I was 6. I've always known. But I didn't think, as I moved on in hockey, I realized I didn't think I could be gay and play the sport I love. So I suppressed it and adhered to the stereotypes and tropes of a hockey bro. I was a womanizer. I partied hard. I was cocky. I walked into a room like I owned it. I acted like I was a gift to the world. And people around me thought I had this pretty cool life. I'd be walking through malls, signing autographs. I'd be getting my friends into clubs VIP at like 16, 17 years old. What they didn't know is I would go home at night when I was in the OHL and junior and pro to my billet's house, and I'd cry. I hated myself candidly, I wanted to die, and on more than one occasion, I tried to. I think a lot of that led to the injuries. By the time I was 18, I started drinking heavily. From 18 to 23, I drank pretty much every day to numb it, to not have to think about it. I wasn't sleeping. I was depressed. I was drinking, and the injuries seemed to follow. And I think a lot of the injuries were, psychosomatic. They were my own doing because I was struggling so much. But throughout that time, I knew, and it wasn't until I was in Europe, I was 23, and I sat myself down. I just said, man, you need to figure this out. Because I knew two things were going to happen. Number one, hockey was going to end. And number two, and most importantly, if I kept going down this destructive path, I was likely to end up dead. So I came back from that season. Instead of going to Sudbury, I went to Toronto, and I went on a date with a guy. And right away, I was like, yeah, you're gay. Mm-hmm. I knew. And at first, it was like this incredible, my career's going to get back on track. I'm going to make the NHL. But it actually got worse because now, instead of suppressing who I was hiding it. I was in the closet, and I wasn't just hiding myself. I was hiding somebody else. And that was exhausting. We dated for 3 years of my life without a soul knowing.
What prompted you to finally reach that point where you decided, I got to come out?
Well, I came out. It's weird. It's a weird, coming out, such a weird thing, because you're almost always coming out. Like, I'm on TV. I've been on covers of magazines and newspapers and everything else, and I still come out to people. Like, it's, like, they're like, oh, do you have a wife? Blah, blah, blah. I'm like, no, I have a husband. And, I'm always coming out. But I think the biggest thing was back then, the first catalyst for me was Brendan Burke, Brian's son. After Brendan came out on TV publicly, I reached out to him and we became friends. And I was still closeted and playing. I was at Concordia, and we would talk every day. And then one day he sent me a text and said, I can't wait for the day that you're out to your family like I am to mine. And I ignored him. And it wasn't because I didn't think my family would be inclusive or supportive. I knew they would, but they were so involved in the sport, I was afraid they'd start to stand up to the language, behaviors, and attitudes and out me publicly, accidentally. Those ended up being the last words he ever said to me. 2 days later, Brendan passed in a car accident. And after he passed, and I had just broken up with the first person I ever loved, and Brendan was the only one who really knew, I decided to come out to my family to honor him. And I came out to my family and everyone in my life who wasn't involved in hockey. So I was afraid I'd lose opportunities to play. And even after I stopped playing, I moved back to Sudbury and I started doing off-ice training, on-ice skill development, working with hockey players. And I was working with over 100 a day, and I was afraid if they knew I was gay, they wouldn't want to work with me. Mm-hmm. And then one day I got a phone call from a hockey mom, and she said, Brock, I want to set you up on a date. And I just went, oh no. Like, what do I do? What do I say? How do I get out of this? But then I started to wonder what she thought my type was. So I asked her, I said, what's her name? And she said, Steve.
Yeah.
I came to find out all my athletes knew I was gay. And instead of like, at first I freaked out. I was like panicking, heart racing, like they're not going to want to work with me. My businesses are going to go under. I employ people. They're going to be out of work. But then I thought about it and I went, wait, they all know I'm gay and they choose to work with me. These hockey bros who act the same way I acted when I was their age. It's kind of cool. And instead of telling them, I decided to do a little sociology experiment and observe their behaviors, kind of like animals in the wild, hockey players in their natural habitat. Because I realized something, they know I'm gay, but they don't know that I know that they know that I'm gay. And I started to notice that anytime they'd say something homophobic, they'd freeze up and apologize to me. From a pro to a kid. And I'd shrug it on, keep going on with our workouts or whatever we were doing. And after a while of this, I started thinking maybe we're creating a shift here. But then I thought, or maybe they just like me. I'm one of the boys. I go on the ice and I chirp them. We go in the gym and I out bench press all of them. And really, your listeners, that's the most important part of this entire story. But maybe they use slurs when I'm not around. Maybe they just like me but hate gay people. And then one day I wasn't there and I had a sprint coach working some athletes on a track. At the end of a 2-hour workout, he told them they had 10 more sprints. And a younger player looked at the sprint coach and said, "This is so gay." One of my older guys who was in the OHL looked at the younger guy and said, "We don't say that here. Give me 50 push-ups." And that became something all my athletes adopted amongst themselves to hold each other accountable for their language. And then they used their influence as hockey players to take that with them. And before I knew it, people I didn't even know were doing push-ups. That guy created a shift in 100 hockey players, but he also created a shift in me. And it was one of the big catalysts for me coming out. And frankly, doing the work I do now.
We had Brian Burke, Brendan's father, of course, a longtime NHL executive, on the show a couple of years ago. And actually, here's what Brian had to say about Brendan's legacy.
I said, we've got two choices now as a family. Either we move ahead and make Brendan's memory important, and we move ahead as a family, no one moping, no one sitting crying by the side of the road, or we march ahead. And I said, and I'm marching ahead, and so are you. And everyone agreed we're just going to march ahead. And then we said, let's figure out a way to memorialize Brendan's passing and turn it into something positive, which was the You Can Play project, which my kids started. Patrick did most of the work on it, but that's You Can Play is basically our family legacy, and on behalf of the LGBTQ plus community. It's done some great work. Basically, the message is, if you can play, if you're good enough to play, doesn't matter what church you go to, doesn't matter who you go home with, doesn't matter what color your skin is, if you can play, if you're good enough to help our team win, you can play. So if you can play, you can play. And it's been a wonderful thing. It's been very therapeutic for me, obviously, to watch this growth and see the NHL support of it and the other teams, other leagues support of it. It's been a great help, I think, to young people that are coming up, dealing with these issues.
How important for the LGBTQ plus community has it been to have the support of Brian and Patrick Burke?
I think it's so vital to have people like that willing to stand up and use their voice. I think, not-for-profits and charities are lovely. And Brian may disagree with me on this when he says, their legacy is You Can Play. I think their legacy is their voice. To me, that is the most powerful thing they've ever done, is using their voice. I think it's the most powerful thing anyone can do in this world. And when you use it for good and for supportive human beings, it's a next level thing. I remember coming up to my dad, and my dad, Brian and I really like Brian. We have a relationship now, and he's a character, and I really enjoy him. And I remember one night I was in New York, and we were going to do a pride thing, and they were behind. So we were in this little tapas bar, and I was sitting beside Brian, I was sitting beside Berkey, and we were talking. And my boyfriend at the time, now my fiance, husband, was sitting beside me, and he just whispered to me, "This guy reminds me of your dad." And they're very similar personalities, like eerily. They're even built the same. They have the same big melon too. Like their heads are probably the same size. I don't think either of them could fit in a helmet. They probably custom made helmets just to go on the ice today. Because, even with youth, you need a helmet to go on. I don't think either of them would be able to. But he he reminded me of my dad in a lot of ways. And this, I'm Irish and I have this big truculent father. And when I came out to my dad, he said, like, well, if a guy like Brian Burke wouldn't care, why would you think I would? And how many people have had that same conversation in Canada because of Brian Burke? So to me, the not-for-profit's nice. Charities are lovely. His voice is the most important thing he's ever done to keep his child's legacy alive, in my opinion, and probably more impactful societally than that Stanley Cup ring he has.
So all of this led you to the ShiftMakers tour and the ShiftMakers program. Tell us about the ShiftMakers.
Yeah, I realize I'm a masochist and that I've decided to torture myself year after year. So I started ShiftMakers last year. Year one, it was called Culture Shift Tour, but I found that kind of divisive. And I changed the name to ShiftMakers. And what the goal was to go to 100 hockey teams in 100 days across Canada to rally people to create shifts. And people think because I'm the gay guy, this is only about gay, and couldn't be further from the truth. Year one, there was a lot more LGBTQ plus themes. And I tell that story of that player with the push-ups. And what really happened from that is that guy created a shift in 100 hockey players. He also created a shift made me realize the impact I could have because of that guy. Is a catalyst to me coming out. Because of that guy, I do the work I do now. Because of that guy, we're having this conversation. Because of that guy, thousands of people have come to me over the years who have been struggling. In some cases, life and death situations. And I've been able to help them get support. And most of those situations weren't even LGBTQ plus related. That guy that day, his small little action, the ripple effect of it is it saved lives. So ShiftMakers is essentially, I share my story to humanize so they recognize language, impact of language behaviors and attitudes, and kind of ease the guard a little bit. And I try and make it funny and light. But really the big thing is becoming a shift maker. And I share that story and then I teach them how. The reason it came about is because I was doing this work and I was going into teams, I was going to schools, I was going into corporates, and I was speaking. And, I'd go to like decision makers, whether it's for partners or this or that, or people in the hockey world, be like, yeah, that's nice, but you can't be everywhere. And that really bothered me because I don't like being dismissed. And I don't like being under almost, what's the word I'm looking for? I never want people to, I want people to always think of me as somebody like, we can't discredit anything he could do because he'll make it happen. So when they said that, and I kept hearing that, I said, no, I'm going to be everywhere and I'm going to show you. So I started ShiftMakers, and last year I went to 103 teams in 100 days. Year one in Canada, I went to the 7 NHL cities rather, in their vicinities. And year two this year, we've expanded to the point that we're at, what are we at? We're at, I think I just went to 140 teams in Canada in 85 days, and I'm on my 6th or 7th city in the US, because I've started a US version of it. And it's even evolved compared to last year. Like now, when I rally people to create shifts, it's become more about courage and integrity, because I teach them 3 ways. You humanize an issue, you put a face to it, and that's what I try and do. It becomes more real. You recognize the impact. Then the environment you create. And I think people are good people. I truly do. I think we just don't recognize the impacts we're having. So that's why humanizing is important. But if you're a good person, you don't want to make people feel bad. The easiest way to do that is through your words. So I teach them 5 different types of language, but I realized something more recently that comes before that, Joe, and it's to be brave. And this is across the board, but in particular in hockey, we talk in hockey like we're gladiators on ice. We're tough, rugged hockey players. We battle in the corner. We fight in front of the net. We take a hit to make a play. We're tough. We're brave. We're courageous. So I asked them, I'm like, how many of you think you're brave? About half the room puts their hand up. I'm like, how many of you want to be brave? They all put their hands up. I'm like, well, I guess we'll find out. And then I get into a couple types of language, and I get to laughter. And I'm like, why do you laugh when somebody's bullying somebody in the locker room or says something really offensive? And it boils down to fitting it. And I'm like, because what would happen if you didn't laugh? They're like, you'd be the next person targeted. I'm like, what if nobody laughed? They're like, it would stop. I'm like, so let me get this straight. You're laughing at things you don't find funny because you're afraid your family, every team uses an analogy like their family or brothers or something like that, or sisters. You're laughing at things you don't find funny because you're afraid your family's going to bully you. That's messed up. And they're like, yeah. I'm like, but it's easy to laugh. It's safe to laugh. You won't get targeted next if you laugh. Is that brave? And then I talk about body language, and I talk about silence. And I think silence is a big one. You know, we sit there and we go, I'm a good person. I don't say these things. I'm not racist. I'm not homophobic. I'm not sexist. I don't pick on my teammate. I'm a good guy. My teammates, my friends do. And you don't say anything. You keep hanging out with them. You're kind of co-signing it. You're enabling the behavior. I had a 13-year-old boy come up to me last year whose teammates, some of his teammates went to his, he was in tears, and he's like, Brock, I'm Jewish, and some of my teammates went to my hotel room last weekend and drew swastikas on my hotel mirror. And he was playing a year up. And he's like, you inspired me to tell them how it made me feel. I said, do you want to talk to them? He's like, yeah. I said, all right, let's do it. So actually, I was still in the city. So I went in with him and his team. I worked with him and his mom, and he got to humanize. But I got to reinforce language, and in particular silence, because if the media got a hold of that story, 3 players did it, but 7 stood around and watched. They're not going to differentiate between the 3 who did and the 7 who watched. They're going to say 10 players were in a hotel room and swastikas were drawn. They're all going to be labeled as white supremacists or Nazis. And their friend, their teammate, their brother thinks they all want him dead. But it's easy to stay silent. It's safe. Certainly not brave. And then we talk about conformity. You've been around a long time, the game. Have you ever had an interview with an NHL player?
Many, yes.
Yeah. Pucks in deep, shots on net, 200-foot game, play for the
cliches, yeah.
Painful. And you know them as soon as the camera shuts off, their personality comes out and they have it. Yet they conform. They conform in the locker room. They conform when they're on TV and on radio. They conform everywhere they go. They dress the same, they talk the same, they walk the same. I'm sure you could walk into any mall in Canada and pick out a hockey player. I can. I've done it on Zoom. I've been on Zoom with sports schools, and I can pick out the hockey kids just from the way they sat. And it's not truly who they are. It's a part of who they are, but it's not fully who they are. Yet in a guy's locker room, there's a few things you can talk about. Women, video games, partying, sports, music, as long as it's rapper country today. I'm like, you call yourselves a family? Tell me something you typically wouldn't tell your teammates about yourself. And before I added the brave stuff, they would tell me things, and it was nice, like, you know, but it was kind of surface level. And then more recently, when I started, and it just clicked it last December, and when I started adding in the courage and the bravery, now I look at them, I say, you have two answers. You have the surface level answer. I make grilled cheese. I love to cook. Cool. Nobody cares. But then you have a deep answer. You have the answer you're actually afraid to share with your teammates. The one, something you like, something you don't like, something you're embarrassed to tell the boys, something, it might be a gripe you have in this locker room. And once I started doing that, it's fostered a psychologically safe space for these kids to share. We've had people who have been self-harming that have come forward in front of their teams, and we're able to get them support. We have players. I had one guy say, I have a stutter, and you guys chirp me to the point that I don't want to speak in public. I'm afraid to talk in public. Another kid is sitting there saying, on a team, top player on his team, top team, his age group, probably in the country. You guys bully me to the point that I hate hockey. I hate coming to the rink. I don't love it. And he's bawling. The amount of kids struggling with pressure and this and that, and adults too. I was just with some universities and junior teams in the US. And this is coming out in every single session. And it's funny, my work was about LGBTQ+, but if, you know, the straight white kids make up the majority of the room, and if they're hunting each other, how do you foster inclusive environments for anyone else? So it's sort of changed, and it's like, no, this needs to be about creating welcoming environments for every single person. Every single person needs to feel safe in there to be themselves.
Yeah, it's more important to have integrity and doing what's right. I mean, if you walk into the playground with your friends, and one of them is pushing all the kids around and bullying them, I mean, we all have our own, you know. It's one thing to be the bro, and it's one thing to be, in a part of that group. But, you know, it's more important to have personal integrity and to do what's right and say, no, we can't do this. This isn't allowed. But see, bullying is such a thing today. But, you know, I think I was looking at your social media, and you had a real cool thing here, which I want to play for us, is the Vicky, if you can roll that bagpipes piece that Brock posted.
So at all my sessions, I challenge people to be brave. And one of the ways I do that is through a breakout where I'm like, tell me something you typically wouldn't tell a teammate about yourself, because there's only a few things you can talk about in a locker room, yet they call themselves a family or brothers or sisters, some analogy like that. Tell me something you typically wouldn't tell a teammate about yourself and you're embarrassed to share. Something you like, something you don't like. Maybe it's a gripe in the locker room, something that you need to get off your chest. And this one player at Vincent Massey High School said that he plays the bagpipes and he's never told a teammate. And I said, well, would you play for the boys? And he seemed apprehensive, but I challenged him to do it. I challenged him to be brave. Not only did he play for his teammates, but look what he did for everybody at the rink on senior day. this is powerful. This is how we create shifts in the culture. This is how we make it better for everyone. When everyone can be themselves, the better everyone feels in that locker room at every age, every skill level of our sport.
Empowerment. Beautiful. What would you add to that?
It's part of me is like, isn't it silly that, somebody plays a musical instrument and they're afraid to share because they'll be called gay.
Mm-hmm.
And yet at the same time, him having the courage to do that, not only in front of his teammates, because that was challenging to do it potentially in the locker room, right? Like where it's a safe space. To do that in front of classmates who are in the stands watching the playoff game, parents, the other team you're about to play against, that takes courage. And there's probably somebody else in that room who feels similarly to him and is struggling to embrace who they are and play the sport. And I think from my experience and people coming to me, it actually pushes people away from our sport because they feel like, I can't be me, I'll get made fun of, and I like other things too. So I'm just going to pursue those other things. And the way some of that came about was there's an NHL player, and I'm not going to expose which one it is, but I've been told that he's been traded a number of times because when he's on the road, he would rather go read books or go to museums or discover cities instead of going drinking with the boys. Like we see somebody who's interested in culture, in society, in learning as a negative. This guy's currently in the NHL. Like it's 2025 and we're still feeling this way. I don't know. I think we have to evolve that. We're creating hockey robots, and this sort of breaks that, where somebody can be themselves, and maybe somebody else in that room likes something they're afraid to share. And I had a kid I think it was in Seattle, told me, bawling his eyes out, he's 15 years old, and he goes, I like writing short stories and books. I'm like, that's incredible. I go, why don't you tell anyone? Because they're going to call me gay. Bawling. And it's like, what are we doing in our locker rooms? Why aren't we lifting people up and celebrating things they like? Corporate culture has done studies now that show the more you can bring your full self to work, the happier you are. And the happier you are, the more productive you are. So I try and hit them with this as well, because even you may not care about anything I'm talking about, but even from a selfish perspective, the more you allow that guy to share his love of bagpipes, or to be able to do it and not feel embarrassed and not have to hide it and suppress it and be in the closet in a sense, the more, the happier he's going to be, the better he's going to play. And that has a ripple effect. That creates a shift. Now everyone starts feeling they can do that. And to me, that's how we evolve this thing. If a straight white kid can't sit there and be like, I like playing the bagpipes, how can somebody come out? How can somebody from a non-traditional faith in our culture be themselves?
What do you do personally to stay on the beam?
Like, to keep myself from going crazy doing all this?
Right. And to keep focused and keep yourself in a sane mental state and not get overly frustrated by what's happening in the world and everything else.
I don't get frustrated with the world because I'm boots on the ground, right? And I get to see people and talk to people every single day. I get to avoid, like we're talking about tariffs and this, that, and the other, and the potential want to overtake Canada. And I'm sitting there in America talking to real Americans, and they're acting the same way in those locker rooms and evolving it the same way as the Canadian kids were. They treat me the same way as Canadian kids did. They have respect for our country. And I'm sitting there like, and this with all of it, right? Like when I hear like the anti-LGBTQ plus stuff, this, that, and the other, well, I'm in a different spot where I get to go and engage with those people. I think the hard part for me is now, since I've changed, a lot of people are sharing trauma from sexual assaults to mental health to addiction to self-harm. And it's like now it's not just one person. It used to be like one person would DM me and I'd be able to get them support. Now it's like 25 people in a room at once. And I have no idea what they're going to say. And then I have to be prepared to validate them and answer them and engage with them. It's physically, mentally, and emotionally exhausting. The tour itself, I probably sleep 4 hours a night on tour, if I'm lucky. The schedule is grinding. It's rigorous. It's a lot of emotional and physical wear. I feel like when I'm on tour, it takes me a month. Like I feel like I've aged 20 years, and it takes me about a month after to just come back to normal. As soon as I'm done touring, when it's weird, we have weird laws where I can't even virtually see my therapist when I'm out of province. So I can't even like work with somebody while I'm gone. So I meditate a lot. I'm at the gym twice a day on the road, even on 2 hours sleep. I just have to do as much as possible to keep myself grounded for as long as possible, because if not, I'd break.
Where does the tour get its support from?
I'm pretty fortunate that I have corporate partners across Canada and the United States who really help me out and take care of me and support this. And we do surveys and data. And from that, a lot of people have recognized the impact. So for instance, in Canada, we have, and I'm going to read them off because if not, I'll forget a few. Canadian Tire Jumpstart is my presenting partner. They've been phenomenal from the get-go. I wouldn't be able to do this without them. Air Canada, they're awesome. Power to Give is a charity foundation that's really helped us along. Access Storage has been great. The Toronto Maple Leafs, they were the first NHL team to come in year one. And since then in Canada, the Senators and the Flames have joined. And I'm truly grateful to Brendan Shanahan and Mark Fraser for doing that, and then for the other groups coming on board. The NHL is a sponsor. They've been in since day one, and the PA as well, and the Greater Toronto Hockey League. And it's pretty wonderful to see these groups come on board and believe in it. And then in the US, we have TNT, so Warner Brothers. TNT Hockey has come on board as a sponsor. I have the NHL, the PA, the Chicago Blackhawks, and the Seattle Kraken.
So, I mean, you're a shift disturber, buddy, and you do a lot here. And we're talking about 103 locations, 140 teams, 6 or 7 U.S. cities. Are you just going to go back and do it again next year? What's the deal?
Yeah, I'm finishing off the U.S. right now. I have Saturday I head to Chicago, then I'm off to I go to Iowa and Wisconsin, and then I fly to California, and I have one more there, and then I'm done. And then it's Plan A time. And at the same time, corporate gigs, school gigs, and those one-off fun ones that are just in and out, which is nice. But it's get into prep mode, start it out now, get ready for next year, and then just go take it to another level. I grew it. It's grown. It's a well-oiled machine, and I want to keep it going. But I'm looking to diversify what I do, whether it's sort of podcast, radio, TV, because this stuff's heavy and I need a little more fun. So I need to find ways to get some of that as well. But this is definitely happening again next year. It'll continue to happen. I'm planning on a 5-year run for sure. And then from there, kind of reevaluate where it's at and ways of doing it, whether it's a larger scale event and bring people to me, or continue out the way I am, and grow the US. I need to get to. So next year will probably be over 100 teams in Canada, over 100 teams in the US.
Awesome. So we're partnered with a group called Believe, Become, Be You, and it's a mentorship program for kids 10 to 17, inspired by the late Sean Guinea, led by Papa Jack, based in the States, but it's pretty cool. What's the message you have for kids who might be struggling to find their way today? I know you've got a lot of messages, but anything specific?
First of all, reach out. Whether it's a group like that, whether it's somebody like myself. Don't just hold it in. Talk. And then from there, I don't care who you are. I don't care what your background is. I don't care what you like. You need to learn to accept who you are. And when you learn to accept who you are, then you learn to love yourself. I love myself. I love being a gay man. And my mom always says, why do you say that? And it's because not enough people hear it. And when you love who you are, you stop caring what other people think about you. And to me, that is so incredibly powerful. You know, I'll take criticism and I'll learn and I'll grow, but I don't care if people have opinions of me. I don't care if hockey people don't like me, or if people in society think what I'm doing is bad or wrong, or what. I just couldn't care less, because I love me more than their words mean to me.
That's great. So, best way to get a hold of you, we have your socials are Brock McGillis 33 on Instagram, Brock McGillis on Facebook and LinkedIn, and of course your website, brockmcgillis.com. Best way to get a hold of you is through the website?
Website, yeah, there's an info email there. My DMs are open on socials. I'm traditionally on Instagram more than the other ones these days, but yeah. Either way, they both work.
All right, buddy. I want to thank you for taking this time to join us. It's been awesome. And love this, and continued success with ShiftMakers. And I don't find a way to get a little more sleep, I guess. But if you're able to function on the 2 hours, you can still do it. And maybe you're going to find a way to reach more people in an easier fashion as time goes on. But this is working great. And, I don't think there's anything that we can do as human beings that's more, fulfilling than, helping other people. And, the more that we understand that as a society, the better off we're going to be, And so thank you for that.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks for having me on. Thanks for amplifying the message. I truly appreciate it.
Beautiful. Okay, when we come back, we'll have Ken Daniel Scott Oak, Leaving a Legacy Recovery. In 1992, the best locally owned restoration companies came together with one goal: to make disaster recovery better for Canadians. And to this day, DKI remains one of the only 100% Canadian-owned disaster restoration groups in the market. Fire, flood, or storm damage. When things go wrong, the right help makes all the difference. With the right tools and local expertise, we handle everything from emergency response to full-scale restoration, getting homes and businesses back on track the right way. Because a home is more than four walls, a business is more than a building, and recovery is about more than repairs. When you choose DKI, you're choosing a company that's put Canada first since 1992. Locally owned, nationally backed, Canadian through and through. Addiction Rehab Toronto, Toronto's #1 alcohol and drug treatment center, saving lives, reuniting families. The only treatment center in the province to offer medical detox, treatment, sober living, and lifetime aftercare all in one place. Our unique and specialized programs are designed to equip our clients with the tools to successfully lead a life of dignity, respect, and purpose. Let us help save your life or your loved one's life. Call today for more information or to facilitate an intervention. 1-855-787-2424 or visit addictionrehabtoronto.ca. We know about life and death because we do have something else in common, and that's we both lost a son to a fentanyl overdose. Tell us about Jamie.
He was fun. He was gregarious. He loved to laugh, and that's why for our foundation we do roasts. There he is with our previous dog Puck in the basement. Puck would be a great partner for him and his sister Arlen. We lost Jamie at 23 years old. He loved hockey, loved basketball too. Was a pretty good basketball player, and he had a little height on me. Actually, he hit, I think 5'9" or so, which was big for our family. But he loved to laugh. A good kid, a big heart, and so many friends. And that day when his funeral, on December the 11th of 16, when he passed, one of the worst snowstorms we've had in Michigan in years, and that was when Mickey had the cup. We were young. That was the last picture we had together in Florida on the ice. He was in rehab in Florida, and was 228 days of sobriety. And days of sobriety matter. And a scrupulous doctor there who's now was sentenced to 20 years in prison. He was reduced to 12. But that whole place where he was staying, where he shouldn't have been staying, doctors who duped him and gave him Xanax when you could never give a recovering addict Xanax. And they did. He felt better about himself, and he should have known not to take anything. I'm absolving him from him. But that home, and people ripping people off with free rent just so they could go through the whole cycle, what is called patient brokering. You go get blood tests. Mm-hmm. I was getting bills for $50,000 for pissing in a cup. I mean, it was unbelievable, and how fraudulent it was. And we had over 60,000 of bills. Some people had millions because they just get you to a place where you think you're in a sober home. They send you for testing. The doctors built the insurance industry, and the sober home, which isn't, gets paid off. And Jamie was in that sober home, should have known, not so sober home, should have known to take nothing, but he did. And the pill he took was laced with fentanyl. And they waited to clean up the place, stole his shit. E60 did a report on that on ESPN. And they waited an hour before they called the meds, and he was already gone.
There was a piece that about Jamie, that story that aired a while back, and we're going to just pull a clip from that. Vic?
If someone loses a struggle to that deadly disease, cancer, for example, they've lost that valiant struggle, and yet someone who dies of addiction is said to have died in an alley alone with the needle in their arm. And that is not the case.
Scott said to me, and I'll never forget, he said, you don't know right now what this is going to mean to you in the long run. You don't know right now what your calling is in all of this, but you will find it.
And that's Scott Oak.
We're talking about Scott Oak. Yeah. So, we had Scott Oak on the show. He lost his son, Bruce, to an overdose in 2011. Scott has taken his son's legacy to the next level with the opening of the Bruce Oak Recovery Center in Winnipeg, a very successful recovery center. Here's Scott talking about that incredible
We expect 180 or 200 men each year to pass through Bruce Oak, and every one of them, we hope, will be able to get their lives back. That may be asking too much because there is a failure rate in recovery, but everybody's got a chance there, right? The Bruce Oak Recovery Center offers hope, and it offers hope based on two cornerstones. One is a continuum of care. That you can stay in the program for as long as it takes to get it right. It's not 21 days, 45 days, 90 days. It's however long it takes to get it right. And that could be a year, it could be 2 years. And the second cornerstone of it is those who can afford to pay are not turned away because they're covered by a combination of social assistance and fundraising. So no one's left behind at Bruce Oak, and it's our son's legacy.
Discover the secret to timeless vitality at Renew Medical Center in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. Our specialists unravel the science of aging, tailoring plans to defy its effects. Experience cutting-edge regenerative therapies such as stem cells and exosomes, addressing aging at its core.
It's a wonderful spot, and I highly recommend it for whatever you may need, whether you just want to feel better, you want to look better, have basically a quality of life, just to ramp it up a little bit as we age.
Liberate yourself from aging-related concerns, where accountability, technology, and passion for regenerative medicine converge. Begin your path to peak health and wellness with us. Schedule your appointment today at renewpv.com and elevate your quality of life.
Parents, what's the biggest fear for kids 10 to 14? A future they think they can't handle. At Believe, Become, Be You, we know confidence in the future is a habit we can build. Our course doesn't just prepare kids for the future, it seeds them with skills they will use now. For a limited time, the I Believe in Me Foundation is offering the first 1,000 kids and their parents 1 year free access. This priceless opportunity will save you over $2,000. This isn't just a course. It's a journey in developing life-enhancing skills that will grow with your child, fostering gritty minds, creative futures, and better bonds. Get signed up now at BelieveBecomeBeYou.com. That's BelieveBecomeBeYou.com.
And we want to thank all the folks who make this show possible. These are friends, trusted business associates, and all-around great people. We highly recommend them all. Thank you for your support of Canadian sports. A reminder that the show is available on iTunes, Spotify, Breaker, wherever you get your podcast from. Also, check out the show on YouTube. All of our past great shows are on there. Shorts, clips, like and subscribe. It's absolutely free. And our socials, of course, are at Joe Swiss Tilley on Instagram and X. Joe Tilley's Great Canadian Sports Show on Facebook. Thanks once again to Brock McGillis for joining us. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time. MNP, a leading Canadian national accounting, tax, and business accounting firm. MNP proudly serves and responds to the need of their clients in the private, public, and nonprofit sectors. Through partner-led engagements, MNP provides a collaborative, cost-effective approach to do business and personal strategies to help people and organizations to succeed across the country and around the world. With local offices in Oshawa, Mississauga, Burlington, and more, their team is here to support you. Visit mnp.ca today to learn more. Brian Gribben Insurance Planning, helping you solidify your financial future.
At BGIP, what we do that's unique in the marketplace is we show people how to spend and enjoy their money in their early years of retirement without the fear of running out. Also, we're able to do this without you having to change financial advisors. Please look us up at bgip.ca today, and let's book a 30-minute phone call to see how we can bring value to you and your family in your planning.
Call Brian today for all your retirement needs. We did. 905-686-5678. Hi, I'm Joe Tilley, And I want to tell you about the painting pros. Patrick and his crew recently came into my home and they painted the walls. They added some color. It's fantastic. And I can't be more satisfied with the work they did. That crew is tremendous. They were professional. They were courteous. They were respectful. And they did a fantastic job. Look at that. Look at that color. I just can't stress enough how satisfied we truly are with Patrick and his crew. For all your painting needs, go with the pros. Joe Tilley here. My wife Penny Claire and I recently took an amazing trip to Egypt and Jordan with Trip Oppo. And here are our top 10 must-dos. Another must-do experience is a luxurious cruise down the Nile River. The ship was elegantly furnished with premium facilities, including a spacious lounge and a swimming pool. The cabins were comfortable, well-appointed, offering panoramic views of the Nile River and the surrounding landscape. I would highly recommend that you book your next trip through Trip Oppo. Call them today. Rooted in 60 years of tradition, Sleepy Hollow is a private golf club with a friendly community of members just minutes from Toronto. With mature trees and rolling fairways, Sleepy Hollow provides a challenging and enjoyable experience for passionate golfers. Enjoy great golf, amazing dining, and a picturesque patio second to none. Visit sleepyhollowcountryclub.com.